Hey guys, I'm Drew Brashler with DBB Audio, and today I'm doing a quick video on the differences between the Behringer Wing and the Behringer X32, and if you have an X32, why you should upgrade to the Wing or why not. So, this video is one of many on my channel, so if you haven't already, make sure to like and subscribe to my channel, as I'm always constantly putting out brand new videos on the Behringer products with the X32, the X Air, and now the Behringer Wing. Also, check out my blog at dbbaudio.com and you'll find a bunch of resources and blog posts over there all about production and audio. So let's go ahead and dive in. I am a longtime avid user of the Behringer X32. It's a great console. It's a great price point. It has pretty good sound qualities to it, and it's just a very inexpensive, great console. It has 32 main inputs and main channels, and then an additional 6 auxiliary inputs on it, making it a total of 38 channels that you have available to you. Now, the Behringer Wing was just released a while ago, and it's Behringer's new mixer in their lineup of digital audio consoles, and this console is impressive. Everything about this console I've been blown away by. There are 48 total channels, and those channels can either be mono, stereo, or this thing called mid-side, which is basically separating the left-right from the center portion of the audio. And so those 48 channels are broken into 40 full processing channels and 8 auxiliary processing channels. So basically, auxiliary inputs are going to be less processing available to that input. So you have limited capacity on processing. Now, what does that mean? Well, let's dive in on the console. So I'm going to go down to 37 through 40 and show you this. So we have our channel 40 here, and then we have our channel auxiliary 1 here. And so we can see that there's a whole bunch more information on the left-hand side than there is on the auxiliary channel. And what that means is that we have a low-cut, high-cut, tilt, and delay available to us on our full processing channel, whereas on our auxiliary channel, we just have invert, which is just a polarity invert. We have a full gate processing, and then we also have EQ, which this also has, but there's also a compressor, so your dynamic section. The auxiliary does not have gate, and it also does not have the compression. We can see that we have one insert point that is pre-fader, and then on the full processing channels, we have a post-fader insert point. Now that means that we can place an insert of the effects rack in any position that we want to on the full processing channels. But the aux channels, we only have a pre-fader insert point. One of the biggest things that I loved about the X32 was the effects rack. There were 16 effect slots that you could have. The first 8 of them were for your time-based effects like reverbs and delays, but you could also insert insertable effects like a compressor or an EQ. And same thing with 9 through 16 on that. You could only do the insertable effects on those channels with an EQ or a dynamics, that sort of thing. So the Behringer Wing is similar, and so if we hit our effects section, we have our first 8 racks that are going to be our time-based effects, so reverbs, delays, chorus, that sort of thing. And then the standard effects is on the right-hand side, so 9 through 16. Those are going to be our insertable effects. And the Behringer Wing actually has a thing that is pitch fix, which is a form of auto-tune, which works very well. And so I will be making another video about that. But that's one example of a little bit of a more advanced effect that's built into the Wing than the X32. Some of my favorite effects on the X32 was the precision limiter, which was great for inserting on an output bus for, say, stream, for sending it out to a web. And then we also have some things called like the Ultimo compressor, which is a model of the 1176. There's also the Leisure compressor, which is a model of the LA2A. And so those things, if you take a look in the effects engines, aren't available for us to select here. Well, why is that? It's because it's built into the channel now. So if we go to a channel, I'm going to go ahead and select channel 37 right here. I can go to my gate, and my gate has all of these gate emulations as well as a few dynamic EQ. We have our wave designer. We have a 1176, which is the Ultimo compressor. We have the LA2A, which is the Leisure compressor. And then if we go into our EQ section, there's also a bunch of emulations of very famous EQs. And then again, in our compressor section, we have a bunch of emulations on our more fancy compressors. Additionally, we have 2 insert points. And so I'm going to bring up my vocal channel, and I'm going to show you what I've done here on this vocal channel. So we have this great emulation model. It's called the PSE 545. The PSE 545 is a great emulation of one of the Neve products that does a very, very natural sounding gate. And so this is one of my favorite gate options to use on really any console. And this just so happens to have it built into the console. Next, in my effects, I have a Combinator inserted directly onto this channel. So this is going to be a multi-band compressor, and so we can see that the UI for this effect plugin is way better. So we can actually go tap on the section and we can change the crossover frequency, and it's just visually a whole lot easier than the X32 version of the dual combiner or the stereo combiner. And so I loved using this on the X32 for a vocal, but it was very hard to train someone because the UI of it just really wasn't that great. The Wing has definitely changed that. Next, I have just a little bit of EQ. I am not using a plugin emulation on that. But then I take all of these into my 12:1 ratio 1176. This thing is great. I love using this on vocals. I'm typically at a 12:1 ratio on that. Attack is usually at 3, release is usually at 7, and then I'll fiddle with the input and output on this to get my gain reduction to the right spot. And so then after the fader, so that was pre-fader. There's my post-fader section of where I can send it to. But post-fader, I then put it into the pitch fix. And so this is a great way of having auto-tune on board on this console without any additional external gear. I have a built-in auto-tune. So I have, in essence, I could have 5 plugins or effects inserted on this one channel. So I have the PSE, which is an emulation. I have the Combinator, which is using the effect rack. I have this, which I could go and select one of these. And then I have my 1176 and a pitch fix, all on one channel. So that alone has just blown the X32 out of the water. I would say if I was to put a number behind how much more processing power there is in the Wing versus the X32, I would say there's about 4.5 times more processing power in this console than there is on the X32. And mainly because you can insert in all of these emulations directly into the channel without adding any latency. When we had a channel go through the effects rack on the X32 and additionally on the Wing, it would add latency. So by having it built into the channel, it's not adding any latency. Now, this doesn't just end at the channels. We can actually do this on the mix buses. So I am doing this as my drums here. I have my drum bus, and then I have a drum compression bus, or a parallel compression bus for my drums. So my drum bus, I end up sending all the drums. So kick, snare, toms, hi-hat, cymbals, all of it. On the drum parallel bus, I only send the snare, the toms, and the kick. And what this does is you put it through a very, very good compressor, doing a lot of compression on your channel, and then you do some EQ to it. So you boost the lows, boost the highs, maybe cut the mids, and it just adds in this enormous sound. If I was to do this with an inserted effect, it would add latency. And that latency would then add comb filtering to that channel. So when I brought both of those up, it would mess with the sound and make it sound terrible. But because this is built into the channel, by doing this no stressor, which is the Empirical Labs distressor, it's an emulation of that, I can have all of this with no time latency added by using this compressor. So that's another great portion of this. The next portion of the Behringer X32 and the wing debate is that the Behringer X32 had 16 mono mix buses. So there were 16 mono mix buses. So if you wanted to have a stereo mix bus for, say, like a stereo in-ear or a stereo send for some reason, you would have to take 1 and 2 and combine them together. You'd link them. Well, the Behringer wing, if we go and select our bus masters, has 16 stereo buses. Wow, 16 stereo buses. So that means that if you want to have your in-ear in a stereo setup, all you have to do is to take 1 of the 16. And then if you have another band, that's 2 of the 16 rather than 4 of your 16 mono on the X32. Moving on with more of the buses, our main bus, we actually have 4 main buses on the wing, whereas the X32 has a stereo plus mono, which could be set up as a stereo plus mono or an LCR, or left center right setup. The Behringer wing has 4 stereo main buses, which can also be configured in a mono setup. And then those can feed our matrix section. So if we take a look at our mains and then tab over to our matrix, we can see that we have all of our matrices right here. So we have 8 matrices, all stereo, built into the console. And one very, very cool feature is on a matrix, I can directly send 2 inputs that of my choosing directly to this matrix. So I could do a mix minus if I wanted to, or I could add in crowd mics into this send without actually having to take up a whole nother separate portion of the console for that. My next favorite thing about the Behringer wing is the user section. You can actually link the left, center, and right fader banks into these 2 user buttons. So we have user 1 and we have user 2. And the beauty of these is I can press user 1 and all of these channels will link together. And I can press user 2 and this is a whole separate fader layout. And so I can simply add these by pressing view and go to assign. And so we can see all of my sections here. So if I go and select user 1 up here, I can just drag and drop all of these channels how I wish to have them. Additionally, if I want to, I can select multiple and drag them down in, and it will populate all of them. So if I had all of my drums that I wanted to add in, I could just go select all of my drums and then drag them down in. Now, not only do you have the ability of programming what's on your user layers, but you also have the ability to program what is on your channels 1 through 12 layers. So for instance, if I went to my 1 through 12, I would see bass through my vocals. Now I have this channel 12 down here. Now what's fun is I can go and throw my drum VCA. Actually, let's do the vocal DCA. I can drop my vocal DCA right here. So I have my inputs 1 through 11 here, and then the very last channel is actually a DCA. So the ability of customizing this layout is phenomenal. You can put a reverb send or a mix bus send directly next to an input, directly next to a matrix, directly next to a DCA. So the ability of controlling what's in front of you on these faders is amazing on this console. One downside that the Behringer wing has in comparison to the Behringer X32 is this only has 8 XLR inputs, which are a combo jack, and 8 TRS line level inputs, which are a 1/4-inch jack. On the output side, it has 8 XLR outputs and 8 1/4-inch outputs as well. Whereas the X32, the full size, came with 32 inputs and 16 outputs, and then 6 1/4-inch TRS inputs and 6 1/4-inch TRS outputs, as well as some RCA jacks. So there is a downside in that if you purchase the wing, you will have to purchase some AES-50 stage boxes. Now, with that being said, if you already have an X32, you can use the wing and the X32 together and use your X32 as the main 32 inputs for your wing. And now you have either a broadcast console or a monitor console or some other use for that console that you may have for your venue or church. But if you have also purchased any stage boxes like the DL32 or the DL16 or the S16 or the S32, any of those, you can get those to work with this console with just an AES-50 cable. So a Cat5 cable, it does have to be shielded, and it is suggested that you have the EtherCon barrel at the very end. But the RJ45 portion of that cable does need to have the shield on it and all the way through that cable to work correctly. But with that being said, if your church has an X32, and you're finding that you are at the limit to what that console can do and need a few more channels or a little bit more processing to get that epic sound from your church, the Behringer Wing is going to be your next step. And it is a very good step because all of the learning that you've done with the X32 can correspond and come over to the Behringer Wing. And all of the input boxes and stage connection and all of that will just work with the Wing. My very last 2 points is that the expansion card on the X32 was 32 mono channels. So it was 32 in, 32 out, and depending on which card you had would give you a USB connection to a DAW on a laptop or even recording to an SD card with the X Live card. The Behringer Wing ships with the Wing Live card, which is a dual SD card slot. So it has 2 SD card slots on it, and each card can control 32 mono channels. And you can actually link SD card slot 1 and 2 and actually do 64 channels mono together at the same time, which is amazing. But then there is a USB 2 port on the back of the console, which allows you to connect your Behringer Wing to a computer and have your favorite DAW program running on it. So such as Logic, Reaper, Pro Tools, any of those things off of that card, which allows you to have your expansion card completely free. By no means is this video a comprehensive list between the differences between the X32 and the Wing. I'm just going to say that. But these are my favorite things between the X32 and the Wing. And if I was a church or a venue that was at the limit of what my X32 could do in terms of processing or input and output count, I would be looking at the Wing. It is a very great console at a very great price, and it has been a joy to mix on. All of the plugin emulations that are built into the channels has been great, and my mix that I've built on this thing is phenomenal in comparison to what I could get on the X32. So thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to like or subscribe to my channel, and make sure to check out dbbaudio.com. Thank you so much.